All right, next to me, I have the brand new Laowa Anamorphic zoom lenses. I've had them for a couple of weeks now, and I thought it'd be really fun to create a spec ad with them to kind of put them through paces and test them out. So let's go ahead and roll that, and then I'll talk about my first impressions of these lenses.
Where artistry meets tradition, and every sip is a celebration. Cheers to the blend that goes beyond expectations. Traveler whiskey is easy to drink, hard not to love.
All right, so that was shot on the red KOMODO X, and all of the footage that you'll see for the rest of this video is shot on the red KOMODO X with just a color space transformed to Rec 709, so you can see how these lenses look. So that said, this video is a first impressions of these lenses. I have only had them for a couple of weeks and just not a lot of opportunity to use them in between my freelance projects and other commitments, but I thought doing a spec ad would be a fun and interesting way to test these lenses out, because it gave me daylight exterior shots, it gave me more stage shots, nighttime exterior shots, and a bunch of different light sources, whether it's practical lights through those cafe lights or the campfire or the artificial lights that I had from all my different aperture and Amaran lights. So between that spec ad and some of these other random test shots, I feel like I've been able to at least formulate a pretty decent first impressions of these lenses. We have a 28-55 and a 50-100. They are a 1.5 times squeeze factor, and both are a T29 to T22. The 50-100 has a minimum focus distance of 0.8 meters, and the 28-55 has a minimum focus distance of 0.45 meters. Build quality is really strong, pretty much all metal construction, same as you'd expect from the Nanomorph Primes. They are pretty hefty lenses, so they do include a lens support foot here to be able to use a lens support, which I highly recommend you doing. Even on the KOMODO X, it has a locking RF ring on there to lock in the lens mount, and then lock in the adapter, and then using a PL adapter, which these lenses ship as a PL mount. Even still, it's still a lot of stress to put on the lens mount, so I've just been using a lens support to alleviate that stress from that lens mount. From an image characteristics standpoint, from a sharpness perspective, I would categorize these as acceptably sharp, and the reason why I say that is because as an anamorphic lens, I'm not looking for very, very clinical like Tokina Vista Prime or Sigma Cine or any of those really sharp, or Master Primes, anything like that. I'm just not looking for really super sharp lenses when it comes to anamorphic lenses, because I'm looking for a little bit of character and anamorphic characteristics. So that's why I say they're acceptably sharp. But if you are familiar with the Nanomorph Primes, then I would say these perform sharpness wise very similarly to the Nanomorph Prime lenses, which I think are pretty sharp lenses to begin with. And I think they are sharp all throughout the zoom ranges on both lenses. Speaking of the zoom ranges, these are actually parfocal. There is an instruction booklet that walks you through how to make sure that you can achieve parfocalness. Is that a word? Parfocalness? To achieve a parfocal performance on these lenses, which I think is pretty crazy. Next up is flaring. I would say that the flaring is a little bit more subtle than the Nanomorph Primes, but not as subtle as the Laowa Proteus. The other thing that I found really interesting is, and I found these on the Nanomorph Primes as well, is you get these cool little like rainbow flaring and stuff like that. It's kind of like a vintage flare almost, which I really like. I think it looks really cool, and I think it kind of leans into more of having some character in these lenses as opposed to being super clinical, which again, for anamorphic lenses, that's kind of what I would look for, and I would expect to have a little bit more fun and character with these lenses. Now, speaking of character, one characteristic of the Nanomorph Primes that carries over to these lenses is pincushion distortion. Again, with the flaring, I think it is a little bit more subtle than on the Primes. However, you're still going to see some of that pincushion distortion. Now, same with the Nanomorph Primes, these lenses do have a bit of focus breathing, but that's not really uncommon for anamorphic lenses to begin with. But as you can see from this footage, you can see there definitely is some focus breathing. Also, being anamorphic lenses, you get that iconic oval bokeh that you come to expect with anamorphic lenses, and even being 1.5 times, I still think the oval bokeh looks really nice. Now, speaking of it being 1.5 times anamorphic, you can actually get a 2 times anamorphic look if you want to by using something like this. This is the Laowa Anamorphic adapter. It's a 1.33 times anamorphic adapter. And if you put this in front of the 1.5 times squeeze, then you actually get a 2 times anamorphic squeeze factor lens, which is really cool. So to make that work, you just set the focus to infinity on the host lens, and then you focus on the anamorphic lens here, and this is already geared for you, which is really cool. One thing to note though is if you want to use this on these lenses or even the primes, you need to make sure that you use a lens support because the anamorphic adapter is pretty heavy, so that's going to add a ton of stress to your lens mount, so you definitely want to use a lens support with that. But it's really cool. It's got a 77mm filter thread on the back of it, so you can thread that directly in front of these lenses and use that lens support, and then you have a 2 times anamorphic squeeze ratio, which is really cool. Something interesting I found on the KOMODO X is in 2 times anamorphic modes on the 28 to 55, you can pretty much use the lens from about 35mm to 55mm on the 28 to 55, and that is if you are in the 6x5 2 times anamorphic setting on the KOMODO X. If you're using the 4x3 anamorphic setting to get that same aspect ratio, 2.67 to 1, as you would get in the 16x9 1.5 times setting for, you know, without the adapter, then you have to zoom in to just over 37mm, somewhere between 38 and 39, to get rid of the vignette. The 50 to 100, surprisingly, you can use it. You can use the 1.33 adapter to get a 2 times anamorphic squeeze ratio throughout the entire focal range of the 50 to 100. So I thought that was really cool. So if you're wanting a 2 times anamorphic look on these anamorphic zooms with the 1.33 times, you're pretty much set from about 35mm all the way up to 100mm, depending on which setting you're using on the KOMODO X. All right, I'm gonna wrap this up. I'm pretty impressed with what Laowa have done with these lenses. It's just pretty remarkable that they have these anamorphic zoom lenses at an affordable price point, you know, especially compared to the rest of anamorphic zoom lenses that are out there. You know, if you are in the market for anamorphic lenses, then I think the anamorphic zooms should be a serious consideration. They are a really interesting look. They are very fun to shoot with, and they do give you a very different perspective and different look than spherical lenses. And if you like that, then I think the anamorph zooms are worth a serious consideration. I'll leave links in the description below so you can go navigate to the appropriate places depending on when you're watching this. So that's all I have for you for this video. I'm pretty sure I covered everything that I intended to cover in this video. If I didn't, then I will see you in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Peace.